Hey everybody, welcome back to the Chaotic Little Book Corner. My name's Acacia. Today, the Chaotic Little Book Corner is more chaotic than usual. I am in a different location, sort of, not really. I've just kind of moved sideways because now there's boxes up, down, here. It's fine. So, quick announcement. After some much consideration and time and energy put into packing, I have discovered that I am not going to be able to make videos the week I am moving because I will not have any books to talk about because they will all be packed, and also because I won't be able to fit in this chair in this spot. It will be too tight. I have not put all my books in boxes yet, as you can tell, and I am already swarming with boxes. So it's going to be interesting, and I don't really know what to do about it. So the week that I move will not be a week that I am making videos, so not this week, but the week after, I think, or maybe the week after that. I will let you know closer to the date that I am aware of, but yes. Very frustrating. Very frustrating. So, I am going to do my mid-month wrap-up. I have done the math, and if I read 25 books a month, I will hit 300 books this year. And that is a goal that I think I'm going to go for. But I'm also going to go with, if I read 20 books a year, if I read 20 books a month, I'll read like 240 books this year. So somewhere between 240 and 300 books is my goal this year. I feel like that's a doable number since I read 200 last year, and I've already read 12 so far this month. I don't know what day it is though. Ooh, I should have checked that. I don't know. I don't know what the date is. But yes. I've read 12 books so far this month, and I am in the process of reading 3 more. I am reading a short story collection, a nonfiction, and a fiction, and I am hoping to pick up another fiction tonight, but we shall see. So let's dive into the books. This is gonna go in order from least to most enjoyed. Bear with me, books are over here on the shelf, and I am over here in the chair, and I have to reach. So, stay there. This is more difficult than I thought. Okay, so the book that I've enjoyed the least so far this month is I Know My Name by C.J. Cooke. Okay, so here are my thoughts. First of all, this is a psychological thriller. I enjoy psychological thrillers on occasion. They're not what I reach for regularly, but when I read them and they're good, I really enjoy them. So, C.J. Cooke had written another psychological thriller that I read prior, which was Boy Who Could See Demons. And I loved that book. I loved it, adored it, absolutely obsessed. And so I thought I would give her another chance as a psychological thriller writer because I really enjoyed her first book. So I am not someone who is good at guessing the plot and where things are gonna go. I'm actually really terrible at it, which makes reading psychological thrillers really fun for me because I usually can't just be like, I wonder if this is gonna happen, and then it happens. I predicted this book from 40% in. I knew what was gonna happen. I had it all down on lock. Like, I was already there for it, and I was underwhelmed. I don't think that it's a bad book. Like, I think that if you like psychological thrillers and you want one that's easy to read and quick and has some pretty nice writing, it's a decent book. Like, I definitely would say it's a decent book, but I am not impressed. I found it to be predictable and tropey and really, really overdramatic. The premise is that there is a woman who wakes up on an island and she's lost her memory, and at the same time there's a man whose wife has gone missing and he is trying to find her and she has abandoned her children. And you kind of just know where it goes from there. Like, it's kind of easy to guess, and it does go there from there. So I was disappointed. I was sent this for review by Grand Central Publishing, and I really hope to work with them again. I really hope that this review won't jeopardize that, but like, I didn't like it. Next, we have Fire and Fury, Inside the Trump White House by Michael Wolff. I'm really not impressed. I found this really poorly written. I found it really gossipy, and I found it completely hypocritical in the way that it was delivered. It was delivered as if Trump would have delivered it. It was really, really hearsay, and I was unimpressed. I think that it is overhyped and underwhelming, and just overall a pretty bad book. I believe that Trump is doing some bad shit in the White House. I believe that there is some really shady stuff happening, and I think that the bad stuff he's doing should speak for itself, and it shouldn't have to turn into gossip. And I think that this really turns it into gossip, and there's really no call for that when the facts are already bad enough. Like, we don't need to make it worse. Plus, there was a lot of typos, which really perturbed me. Perturbed? Is that the right word? I think it is. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it perturbed me. Then I was sent Feel Free by Zadie Smith, and this was sent to me by Penguin Press. I didn't dislike this for the writing. I loved the writing style. I absolutely adore Zadie Smith. I think she is fabulous. And the themes of this book were phenomenal and really deep, and I really appreciated them. And the thoughts were concrete and well executed and universal. However, I couldn't enjoy it, and I gave it 3 stars because I didn't know half the people that were being mentioned because it was so British. It just made it so unenjoyable for me to have to read this book that was so blatantly British that I couldn't understand half of what was going on because I didn't know the political system and I didn't know the references, and so I just felt stupid the whole way through. There was definitely some points in here where I thought there were some great academic statements that were universally true, but as an overall collection, it was very in its time and place and very focused on a certain audience, and I was not that audience. Ow! It fell on my foot. Imogen Hermes Gower, The Mermaid and Mrs Hancock. This is the lead debut for Vintage. I went into this with expectations of magic and Sarah Waters-ness and some very interesting conversations about mermaids and history and time and place and fabulous environments, and I got a lot of that, but there was a romance in it, and I didn't know there was a romance in it, and I don't like romances, so I was really disappointed because most of it focused on the romance, and I don't like romance. I'm gonna keep this book on my shelf. I appreciate it for what it does. I really enjoyed it as a novel for the most part. The writing was beautiful. I really think it was a well-done novel. If you like romances, this is fantastic. If you like historical fiction and romance, just right up your street. I was really lucky to receive an ARC from this from Vintage or Harvill Secker. And I'm really super blessed for that, and I was super happy to be able to read it before its publication date. And I definitely enjoyed it for what it was, but it wasn't my favorite, and it was a 3 star, so it was okay. Like, I enjoyed it to a point, but I I just don't like romances, and so it didn't hold true for me in any way. Next, we have The Murderers, and The Murmurs made a Lizzie Borden novel by Erica Melman, and I feel like I read this too close to See What I Have Done. And I feel that way because See What I Have Done I really enjoyed as a Lizzie Borden novel, and I felt a lot of connection to, and I was really sickened by it and felt really excited by it and kind of thrilled by it. And then I was reading the same story. There was a difference in here where there is a character named Brooke who is in some way present day connected to Lizzie Borden, and her story is actually really interesting, and I did enjoy following that. But I felt like I was reading the same story from the maid Bridget's perspective. It felt very similar and very fact heavy, and it was also very interesting in this perspective that Bridget felt as if the awkwardness in the house radiated from the beginning of her time working there, versus just in the later times. And it made some very creepy aspects to the Borden family, which was kind of fun. But again, I had just read a Lizzie Borden novel. I thought I was going to be right on board with it because I just read a Lizzie Borden novel, but because I had just read a Lizzie Borden novel, this fell flat. However, if you haven't read a Lizzie Borden novel recently and you're interested in the Lizzie Borden murders, this is a decent book. I really enjoyed it for what it was, but I didn't think that it was better than See What I Have Done. I think it was an okay book. Like, I think it was definitely okay, but it wasn't as good as the other Lizzie Borden book I read. I was sent this one for review by Bonhomie Press. I was super grateful for this, and I was really excited to receive it, and I did enjoy it for the most part. It just fell a little flat for me because I just read a Lizzie Borden novel earlier. Then I was sent Girls Burn Brighter by Shabaha Roll, and this was sent to me by Flatiron Books, and I flippin' adored this book. So the main characters are Purnima and Savitha. And they are two young women growing up in India and trying to survive in this culture that really doesn't respect or value women, and trying to find their place in society when their only expectation of their life is to get married and have children and reproduce for the men. It was heart-wrenching. It was beautiful. It broke me. I cried. I felt really, really drawn to this book, and it really, really stopped me in my tracks. It made me check my privilege. It made me think about some things that I really hadn't thought about, like the poverty in India, which I know about and I'm aware of, but I hadn't really thought about it in a while in like an actual way, where I was like, oh my God, this is not okay. And this kind of reminded me that it's really not okay. And it's really bad there. Like, it's not good. And I felt really connected to this book, and I really enjoyed it. So I would recommend this one. I think it's great. Would I say it's worth a pre-order? It comes out in March of 2018. I would say if you are looking for a good, diverse book that comes from an own voice perspective and has a different twist on the best friend's story and has some really beautiful language and interesting scenery, this is a great novel, and I would definitely pre-order it if you're interested in those things. So that's my opinion. In the House Upon the Dirt Between the Lake and the Woods by Matt Bell. I had a lot of 3-star reads. I'm still on 3-star read, guys. This book was difficult for me. It was really beautiful, but very experimental. And I am not always good with experimental fiction. I sometimes get really, really nervous about it and feel really scared by it. And I think that happened a little bit in this book. The premise is a man and a woman are living in the woods and they are wishing for a child. And one day the wife comes back and she has a child and he has no idea where this child has come from. And she begins to raise this child as their son. And then it goes from there. And the story has so much more to it, and there's so much more layer and depth and thought put into it, and it definitely expands over that story. There's a lot more that follows on, and a lot more of a premise to it. It would be a shorter novel if that was the only premise, and it's not a short novel. It is actually a decent size. It is coming in at 312 pages. So I think that it was an overall great book. Like, I would definitely pick this up if you like experimental fiction and you're interested in fairy tale and folklore. But if you don't feel comfortable with experimental fiction, this might be one to skip just because it is very experimental. I've done a full review on Eileen. I will link it down below in the description box. This is Eileen. I gave it 3 stars. It's by Otusha Moshfik. It's a story about a woman who works in a jail and has a pretty mediocre life, and she is very, very disturbed and strange and has some interesting quirks, and she finds a woman in her life and becomes obsessed with her, and the story progresses from there. A Wrinkle in Time. I read this one in a couple of sittings. It's by Madeleine L'Engle, and I enjoyed this. It talks a lot about consumerism and the experience of media and how that affects society and what it looks like and what it's doing to society. It's a really, really beautiful novel for what it is, and it's really, really interesting. It's definitely sci-fi YA, but it has a really deep connected story and a deep connected point to it that is really relevant to today's society that I think is really, really interesting. And I think that there's a lot to it to kind of experience and dive into and dissect. I found it really, really relevant and really, really beautiful. Sorry to Disrupt the Peace by Patty Yumi Contral. I love-hate this book. I love-hate this book so much, and I think I'm going to do a full in-depth review on it because I felt really, really hateful towards the main character, and that made it really difficult for me to dive into this book. But I really enjoyed it at the same time. So the premise is this woman is waiting for a couch from IKEA to arrive at her apartment when she gets a phone call from her uncle telling her that her brother has committed suicide. And she decides then and there that she is going to go home to her home in Milwaukee, where she hasn't been in 5 years, to go be with her family during this time of crisis. And the story progresses from there. I will do a full in-depth review of this because I feel like I have a lot of feelings and thoughts about it, and I want to digest with you guys. Then I had a reread, which was Alice in Wonderland. This is by Lewis Carroll. I listened to it on audiobook and I followed along in the book. It gave me an excuse to look through the pretty pictures, but at the same time listen, and it was narrated by Jim Dale, so I was pretty happy. I was really happy because I love Jim Dale. He is the American narrator for the Harry Potter books, and so he's very nostalgic for me, and I listened to him with Alice in Wonderland, and it was really, really nice, and I really enjoyed it. It only took like 3 hours to listen to, so it really wasn't that big a deal. But yeah, gave it 5 stars. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's about a little girl who falls down a rabbit hole and goes into Wonderland. If you haven't read it, it's really worth reading. I really enjoy it, and I think it's a really sweet story. It's one of my top 3 books of all time. So it's definitely a recommendation on my part. And then my #1 book of the month so far is Sing Unburied Sing by Jesmyn Ward. I am now in love with Jesmyn Ward and feel so obsessed. I marked this all up. I did a full in-depth review. I will link it in the doobly-doo. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was beautiful, well executed, absolutely devastating, and so wonderful. This is the story of a little boy named Jojo and his experience as he takes a 2-day trip with his mother to a jail up north in Mississippi to go get his father. And if you want to know more, go ahead and watch my review that I will link down below in the doobly-doo. So yes, those are all of the books that I have read so far this month. This video turned out longer than I expected. Yeah, this was my January part 1 wrap up. I will see you all in my next video. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and if you loved it, click that subscribe button down below. And if you have any questions, comments, or quandaries, go ahead and leave them down in the comments below, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!